Now let's begin. Walter Morton drove through the April rain, his rental car cutting through sheets of water on the highway. The true crime manuscript he'd been researching in Portland was done 3 days ahead of schedule, the result of a witness finally breaking their silence about a cold case from 1987. He'd called ahead to the hotel to cancel the rest of his reservation, eager to get home to Chicago. Home meant his daughter Emma, 8 years old with her mother's dark hair and his stubborn chin. Home meant his wife Diane, though lately that word felt heavier than it should. Home meant walking into a house where the air always felt slightly pressurized, as if a storm was perpetually about to break. Walter had been a prosecutor for 7 years before he'd burned out on the politics and the plea bargains that let guilty men walk. He'd started writing about the cases that haunted him, the ones where justice had slipped through bureaucratic fingers. His third book had hit the bestseller list. His fourth had gotten him on a few morning shows. His fifth, the one he'd just wrapped research on, was about a woman who'd murdered her elderly mother for inheritance money and almost gotten away with it. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd met Diane 10 years ago at a fundraiser for the Cook County Public Defender's Office. She was a social worker then, passionate about family services, quick to laugh. Her mother Violet had been there too, dripping in jewelry that probably cost more than Walter's annual salary, watching her daughter with the intensity of a hawk tracking a field mouse. Even then, Walter had sensed something off in how Violet touched Diane's arm to correct her posture, how she interrupted her daughter mid-sentence to clarify what Diane really meant. But Diane had been worth it. They'd married within a year. Emma arrived 18 months later. Violet arrived right after, moving from her Gold Coast penthouse to a sprawling house in Oak Park, 15 minutes from their modest 3-bedroom ranch in Forest Park. To be closer to my granddaughter, she'd said, smiling that smile that never quite reached her eyes. Walter pulled into O'Hare's rental return lot and checked his phone. 7 missed calls from Diane, all from this afternoon. His stomach tightened. He called back. "Where are you?" Diane's voice was strained. "Just landed." "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. Mom's birthday party is tonight, remember? I thought you weren't coming back until Sunday." Walter did the mental calculation. Saturday night. Violet's 60th birthday. Finished early. I'll head straight there. "Walter," Diane hesitated. "Maybe just come home instead. You're probably exhausted. It's your mother's birthday. I should be there." He kept his voice neutral, but he'd spent years reading witnesses in cross-examination. Diane didn't want him there. "Where's Emma?" "With Mom. She wanted to help set up." That familiar tightness returned to his chest. Emma at Violet's house, helping. He'd seen what that meant before, his daughter relegated to some corner, given tasks that would keep her quiet and invisible while Violet held court. "I'll be there in 40 minutes, Walter said. The drive from O'Hare to Oak Park took him through neighborhoods that shifted from working class to wealthy with the subtle inevitability of a rising tide. Violet's house sat on a corner lot, a brick colonial that had been featured in Architectural Digest the year after she'd bought it. Every room was perfect, museum quality, untouched by anything as messy as actual living. Cars lined both sides of the street. Walter counted at least 20 before he gave up. He parked 3 blocks away and walked back through the rain, his overnight bag slung over his shoulder. Through the tall windows, he could see the party in full swing. The first floor blazed with light, figures moving through the dining room and living room like actors on a stage. He recognized Violet's sister May, her brother Glenn, various cousins and friends from the country club. The kind of people who summered in Michigan and wintered in Scottsdale, who spoke in careful voices about property values and foundation boards. Walter had grown up in Cicero, son of a union electrician and a nurse. His father had died when Walter was 15, leaving his mother to work double shifts to keep their house. He'd paid for college with scholarships and student loans he'd only finished paying off 3 years ago. These people, Violet's people, had always treated him like he was tracking mud through their lives. He'd tolerated it for Diane, for Emma, but tolerance was getting harder. He thought back to Emma's 7th birthday, 6 months ago. They'd had a small party at their house, a dozen kids from her school, pizza, a cake Diane had made herself in the shape of a butterfly. Emma had been radiant, gap-toothed and giggling as she opened presents. Violet had arrived late, carrying a box wrapped in paper that probably cost more than everything else combined. Inside was a porcelain doll in a glass case, the kind meant for display, not play. "This is what proper young ladies appreciate," Violet had said, loud enough for the other parents to hear. Not all these plastic toys. Emma had thanked her grandmother politely, the light in her eyes dimming just slightly. The doll now sat on a shelf in Emma's room, still in its case, never touched. Walter approached the front door. Through the sidelight window, he could see into the foyer, marble floors, a crystal chandelier, a round table with an enormous flower arrangement. The door was unlocked. He slipped inside, the sound of conversation and laughter washing over him. Simply don't understand why anyone would choose public school. That was Mae Brennan, Violet's younger sister, her voice carrying from the living room. The state of education in this country. Glenn Rowe, the brother, always ready with an opinion he'd gotten from whatever cable news he watched. Walter moved through the foyer, scanning for Emma. The dining room table was loaded with catered food, silver trays of shrimp, carved roast beef, enough champagne to float a boat. 40 people, maybe more, all dressed in cocktail attire. He'd come straight from the airport in jeans and a button-down. He didn't care. Diane was in the living room, talking to a couple he didn't recognize. She looked beautiful in a navy dress, her dark hair swept up, but there were tension lines around her eyes. She saw him and her face went through a rapid sequence of emotions, surprise, worry, something that might have been relief. She excused herself and crossed to him, keeping her voice low. You should have called. Where's Emma? Walter, please don't make a scene. I'm not making anything. Where's our daughter? Diane glanced over her shoulder. Violet was holding court in the corner, surrounded by admirers, wearing a cream-colored suit that probably cost what Walter made in a month. She hadn't seen him yet. She's helping in the kitchen, Diane said. Walter looked at his watch. 11:07 p.m. It's past her bedtime. Mom wanted her to help serve dessert. It's fine. But it wasn't fine. He could see it in Diane's eyes, the way she couldn't quite meet his gaze. She knew it wasn't fine, but she wouldn't say it, wouldn't contradict her mother, wouldn't risk Violet's displeasure. I'll get her, Walter said. Walter. But he was already moving toward the kitchen, his overnight bag still on his shoulder, tracking wet footprints across Violet's perfect floors. The kitchen was dark. That stopped him for a moment, standing in the doorway. Beyond, through the butler's pantry, he could see the bright lights of the main party. But here, the kitchen was dark except for a small light over the sink. And then he saw her. Emma stood on a wooden step stool in front of the sink, barely visible in the dimness. Her pink dress, the one Diane had bought her for the party, was soaked down the front. Her feet were bare. Her small hands moved in the soapy water, washing dish after dish from the pile beside her. She was crying. Not the loud crying of a tantrum, but the quiet, hopeless crying of a child who'd learned that making noise only made things worse. Walter's vision narrowed to a pinpoint. His pulse hammered in his ears. Every instinct he'd honed as a prosecutor, every skill he'd developed reading people and situations, focused to a laser point on his daughter standing in the dark, barefoot and crying, washing dishes while 40 people laughed and drank champagne 50 feet away. Emma, he said quietly. She jumped, nearly losing her balance on the stool. She turned, and in the dim light he could see her face, red-eyed, streaked with tears, terrified. Daddy. Her voice cracked. You're not supposed to be here. He crossed to her in 3 strides, lifting her off the stool. She was shaking. Why are you in the dark, baby? Grandma said I'm not allowed inside until it's done. The words came out in a rush. She said I was clumsy and broke a glass and I had to wash all the dishes before I could come back to the party, but there's so many and my feet hurt, and I can't reach the shoe. He held her against his chest, feeling the dampness of her dress soak through his shirt. His daughter, his Emma, standing in the dark at 11 p.m., washing dishes, because Violet had decided she'd broken a glass. Something crystallized in Walter's mind, hard and sharp and absolutely clear. He'd spent 7 years as a prosecutor learning how to destroy people's lives legally. He'd spent the last 5 years documenting how people got away with cruelty when the system failed. He knew how to investigate, how to find leverage, how to build cases that left no room for escape. And he'd been tolerating this, making excuses, telling himself it wasn't that bad, that Diane would come around, that Emma would be fine. He'd been wrong. Take my hand, he said to Emma. She wiped her eyes. But Grandma said. I know what Grandma said. Take my hand. Emma's small fingers wrapped around his. Walter picked up his overnight bag with his other hand and walked back through the butler's pantry, through the kitchen door, into the bright chaos of the party. Conversation didn't stop immediately. People were still laughing, still talking. But a ripple of awareness spread through the room as Walter Morton walked through, his daughter beside him barefoot and crying. His face set in an expression that made people step back. He walked straight to where Violet stood, surrounded by her admirers. She saw him and her smile froze. "Walter, you're back early." "Yes," he said. He was aware of the room growing quiet, 40 faces turning toward them. Diane was at the edge of his vision, her hand at her throat. Violet's eyes flicked to Emma, took in the wet dress and bare feet and tear-stained face. Something flickered in her expression, calculation, maybe concern about appearances. "Emma, sweetheart, why don't you go finish?" "No," Walter said. His voice was quiet, but it carried. "She's done." Violet's smile stayed in place, but her eyes went hard. "I don't think you understand the situation. Emma broke one of my baccarat glasses. She needs to learn responsibility. She's 8. Old enough to be careful. Old enough to face consequences." Walter looked at his daughter's grandmother. This woman who'd spent 8 years undermining him, controlling Diane, treating Emma like a performing doll to be shown off or hidden depending on her mood. He thought about all the small cruelties, the criticisms disguised as concern, the way she'd slowly poisoned his marriage. He looked around the room at all these people, Violet's friends and family, the society she valued more than anything. And he said 6 words. "We are done with you, Violet." The room went absolutely silent. Violet's face drained of color. Her mouth opened, closed. "Excuse me." "You heard me." Walter kept his voice level, conversational, the same tone he'd used in court when he had a witness exactly where he wanted them. "We're done. Emma, Diane, and I. You'll never be alone with our daughter again. You'll never criticize my wife again. You'll never step foot in our house again." "How dare you?" Violet's voice climbed. "This is my birthday party, in my house, and you made your 8-year-old granddaughter wash dishes in the dark. Alone. Barefoot. At 11 p.m. While you drank champagne with 40 people who think you're a pillar of the community." Walter looked around the room. Every face was frozen. "Everyone here now knows what kind of person you really are." May Brennan found her voice first. "Violet, is this true?" "Of course not," Violet said quickly. "Emma volunteered to help. She's being dramatic." "I found her crying in the dark," Walter said, standing on a stool because she couldn't reach the sink. "Tell them why, Violet. Tell them about the baccarat glass." Violet's face flushed now, red creeping up from her collar. "She broke it. It was careless. I was teaching her. You were punishing a child." Walter picked up Emma, settling her on his hip. She buried her face in his shoulder. "In front of 40 guests, you sent a child to the kitchen to wash dishes as punishment. You keep a step stool in there. How many times have you done this before?" The question hung in the air. Walter could see it now, the calculation in people's eyes. Violet's sister, May, was looking at her differently. Glenn had stepped back. Even Violet's closest friends seemed uncertain. "Get out of my house," Violet hissed. "Gladly." Walter turned to Diane. She stood frozen, her face pale. "Diane, we're leaving." His wife looked between him and her mother. For a long moment, Walter thought she might choose Violet. 33 years of conditioning, of being told what to think and how to feel, of having her mother's approval be the thing she craved most. Then Diane walked across the room and took Emma from his arms. "I'll drive them," she said quietly. "You follow us home." They walked out together, leaving Violet standing in her perfect living room, her perfect party, her face white with rage and humiliation. As Walter reached his rental car 3 blocks away, his phone buzzed. A text from a number he didn't recognize. "This isn't over. My lawyer will be in touch." Walter looked at the message and smiled without humor. He'd spent 7 years as a prosecutor. He'd written 5 books about people who'd gotten away with terrible things because no one bothered to dig deep enough. Violet Holland had no idea what she'd just started. The house in Forest Park felt different when Walter walked in 40 minutes later. The lights were on in the living room, and he could hear voices from upstairs, Diane getting Emma ready for bed. He dropped his overnight bag by the door and stood in the hallway, letting the adrenaline drain out of his system. His hands were shaking slightly. The prosecutor in him was already cataloging what had happened, the witnesses, the pattern of behavior, the way Violet had reacted. Footsteps on the stairs. Diane came down alone, still in her navy dress, her makeup smudged where she'd been crying. They looked at each other for a long moment. "Emma's asleep," Diane said finally. "I gave her a bath and read her 3 stories." Walter nodded. "My mother is calling everyone," Diane continued. "May, Glenn, the Beasleys, the Colliers. She's telling them you assaulted her." "I didn't touch her." "I know." Diane sat down on the bottom stair, her hands in her lap. "I know you didn't. I was there." Walter waited. "How long have you known?" Diane asked. "About the dishes?" "I didn't. Not until tonight." "But you suspected something." He thought about the way Emma had started flinching when Violet called. The way his daughter had become quieter over the past year, more careful. "Yes." Diane was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was small. "I let it happen." "Diane." "No, I did. I saw things and I told myself they weren't that bad. That Mom was just particular. That Emma needed to learn discipline." She looked up at him, tears streaming down her face. "I let my mother hurt our daughter because I was too scared to stand up to her." Walter sat down beside her on the step. "We're standing up now. She'll fight. You don't know her like I do. She'll use everything. Lawyers, money, connections. She'll try to take Emma. She'll destroy us if she can. Let her try." Diane turned to look at him. "You have a plan." It wasn't a question. She knew him well enough to read the calculation in his eyes. "I have the beginning of one," Walter said. "Your mother made a mistake tonight. She humiliated herself in front of 40 witnesses. People saw what she did. But that's just the surface." "What do you mean?" "People like Violet don't suddenly start being cruel. There's a history, a pattern." He'd seen it in dozens of cases. Abusers always had a trail, if you knew where to look. "Your mother has been doing this kind of thing for a long time. We just need to find the proof." "And then what?" Walter thought about the text message, Violet's threat of lawyers. "Then we make sure she can never hurt Emma again. Or you. Or anyone." Diane was quiet. "Then, my father died when I was 12. Walter knew this, but he let her talk. Heart attack, everyone said. He was 51. I found him in his study." She wiped her eyes. "Mom didn't cry at the funeral. Not once. She wore black Chanel and accepted condolences like she was accepting congratulations. 6 months later, she sold his business and moved us to the Gold Coast. You never told me that. There was nothing to tell. Just a feeling I had, even as a kid, that she wasn't sad he was gone. That maybe she was relieved." Walter felt something shift in his mind, a new piece clicking into place. "What did your father do?" "He owned a construction company. Morton Holland Builders. Medium-sized, mostly commercial work." "What happened to the business after your mother sold it?" "It went under within a year. The new owners ran it into the ground." Diane looked at him. "Why?" "Just curious." But he was thinking about his 5th book, about the woman who'd killed her mother for inheritance. About how some people were very good at getting what they wanted and making it look like natural causes. His phone buzzed. He pulled it out. Unknown number again, but a different one. This time it was a voicemail. He played it on speaker. "Mr. Morton, this is Brett Beasley from Beasley, Collier and Associates. I represent Violet Holland. Mrs. Holland has retained our firm regarding your unprovoked attack on her this evening and your unlawful removal of her granddaughter from her home. We demand you cease all contact with Mrs. Holland immediately. Any further harassment will result in legal action including, but not limited to restraining orders and custody proceedings. Call my office first thing Monday morning." The voicemail ended. Walter checked the timestamp. The lawyer had called 43 minutes ago. "Jesus," Diane whispered. Walter's phone buzzed again. Another voicemail. Then another. He watched as the notifications piled up, 12 voicemails in the last hour, all from the same number. He played one at random. Brett Beasley's voice, angrier now. "Mr. Morton, I've left multiple messages. Your refusal to respond is noted. Mrs. Holland is prepared to file an emergency custody motion if necessary. Call me immediately." 34 calls, Diane said, looking at the phone. In one night. Walter felt that familiar rush he used to get in court when an opposing attorney overplayed their hand. Violet was panicking. She'd gone to her lawyer within an hour of the party ending, and that lawyer had called him 34 times in a single night. People who were confident in their position didn't do that. "She's scared," Walter said. "Of what?" "Of what those 40 witnesses saw. Of what they're thinking right now." He stood up, his mind already working. "Your mother's entire life is built on maintaining an image. Tonight, I cracked that image. And she knows it. Diane stood too, wrapping her arms around herself. What are you going to do? Walter thought about Emma upstairs, finally safe. He thought about Diane, beginning to see her mother clearly for the first time. He thought about Violet Holland, already marshaling her forces, preparing for war. I'm going to do what I do best, he said. I'm going to investigate. I'm going to find every skeleton in your mother's closet. And then I'm going to make sure she can never hurt anyone again. Walter, she has money, power, connections, and I have the truth. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. I've taken down worse people than Violet Holland. His phone buzzed again. Another voicemail from Brett Beasley. Walter ignored it and headed upstairs to check on his daughter. Sunday morning dawned cold and gray. Walter woke at 6 a.m. to find Diane's side of the bed empty. He found her in the kitchen, nursing a cup of coffee and staring at her phone. 37 messages, she said without looking up. From my mother, May, Glenn, people I haven't talked to in years. Everyone wants to know what happened. What are you telling them? Nothing yet. She set the phone down. Emma's still asleep. I checked on her twice. Walter poured himself coffee and sat across from her. We need to talk about what comes next. I know. Violet's going to push for grandparent visitation rights. Illinois law is on her side if she files properly. Diane's head snapped up. She can do that. Grandparents can petition for visitation if they can demonstrate it's in the child's best interest. Given that she's been a consistent presence in Emma's life. He let the implication hang. But after what she did was wrong. But proving it in court is different. Right now, it's our word against hers. And she has 40 witnesses who saw me take Emma out of her party. Her lawyer will spin it as parental alienation. Diane looked sick. So she wins. I didn't say that. Walter took a sip of his coffee. I said we need to build a case. That means documentation. Records. Witnesses. Walter, everyone at that party is her friend. Not everyone. I saw the way May looked at her when I mentioned the step stool. And Glenn stepped back. Cracks are forming. He pulled out his phone and opened a new document. Start from the beginning. Every incident you can remember where Violet was cruel to Emma. Dates, if you can remember them. Details. Diane was quiet for a long moment. Then she started talking. It took 3 hours. By the time Emma wandered downstairs at 9:30, rubbing sleep from her eyes, Walter had filled 12 pages with notes. Incidents going back years, punishments disguised as lessons, criticisms disguised as concern, cruelty disguised as high standards. The pattern was unmistakable. Daddy. Emma climbed into his lap, still in her pajamas. Are we going to see Grandma today? Walter exchanged a look with Diane. They talked about this, how to explain it. Not today, sweetheart, he said. Remember what happened last night? Emma nodded against his chest. You took me home. That's right. And from now on, you don't have to do things that make you sad or scared, okay? Not for Grandma or anyone else. But Grandma said I have to be a proper young lady. You're perfect exactly the way you are. Emma was quiet, processing this. Then, can I watch cartoons? Yes, Diane said, her voice thick. Whatever you want. They set Emma up in the living room with her favorite show and retreated to the kitchen. I'm calling Tom, Walter said. Tom Fleming was his agent. But more importantly, he was also a lawyer who'd worked in family law before switching to literary representation. On a Sunday? He'll answer. Walter dialed. Tom picked up on the third ring. This better be good, Morton. I'm at my kid's soccer game. I need legal advice. Family law. Tom's tone shifted immediately. What happened? Walter gave him the abbreviated version. The party, the dishes, the confrontation, Violet's lawyer calling 34 times. When he finished, Tom was quiet for a long moment. You need a family law attorney. I can make some calls. I need more than that. I need someone who understands how to fight dirty. Someone who won't be intimidated by old money and country club connections. You're talking about going to war with your mother-in-law. I'm talking about protecting my daughter. Another pause. There's a guy, Sam West. He used to be a prosecutor too, white-collar crime. Now he does family law, but he's known for taking on high-net-worth clients who think they're untouchable. Fair warning though, he's expensive. I don't care about expensive. And he plays hardball. You go with Sam. This is going to get ugly. It's already ugly. Violet made it ugly the first time she put my daughter on a step stool in a dark kitchen. All right, I'll text you his number. But Walter? Be sure. Once you start this, there's no going back. Walter looked through the kitchen doorway at Emma, laughing at something on TV. I'm sure. He hung up and immediately called the number Tom sent. It went to voicemail. He left a message explaining the situation and asking for an emergency consultation. 15 minutes later, his phone rang. Mr. Morton? This is Sam West. Tom Fleming gave me the quick version. I need to hear it from you. Walter went through it again, more details this time. When he finished, Sam was quiet. How many times did this lawyer call you? Sam asked. 34 in 6 hours. That's harassment. Especially since he had no basis for emergency custody claims. Sam's voice was sharp, analytical. Here's what's going to happen. Violet's lawyer will file for grandparent visitation. He'll paint you as an unfit parent who's alienating a loving grandmother. He'll have character witnesses, probably some story about how you were unstable at the party. I wasn't unstable. Doesn't matter. It's about the narrative. But here's the thing, 34 calls. That's desperation. And desperation means weakness. A pause. I'll take your case. But I need you to understand something. We're not just fighting for visitation rights. We're going after full termination of grandparent rights. We're going to make it so Violet Holland can't come within 100 yards of your daughter. How? By proving she's abusive. By documenting a pattern of behavior. By finding every other victim she's hurt and getting them to talk. Sam's voice hardened. You said you're a true crime writer. You know how to investigate. I need you to investigate your mother-in-law like she's a suspect in a murder case. Because that's what we're building. A case so airtight that no judge will ever give her access to Emma again. Walter felt something settle in his chest. When do we start? Now. I need everything you have. Dates, times, witnesses, documentation. I need your wife's testimony. I need to know everyone who was at that party. And I need to know everything about Violet Holland's past. Everything. They talked for another 20 minutes, Sam outlining strategy while Walter took notes. By the time they hung up, Walter had a clear picture of what needed to happen. He went into the living room. Emma was still watching cartoons, curled up on the couch with her favorite stuffed rabbit. Diane sat beside her, stroking her hair. We have a lawyer, Walter said quietly. He's good. But this is going to get worse before it gets better. Diane looked up at him. I'm ready. Whatever it takes. You might have to testify against your mother. Good. It's past time. Walter's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You made a big mistake, Mr. Morton. You have no idea who you're dealing with. VH. He showed it to Diane. She sent it from a burner phone, Diane said. She's probably sitting in her house right now, surrounded by her lawyers, planning how to destroy us. Let her plan. Walter sat down on Emma's other side. I've got plans too. But even as he said it, he felt the weight of what he was about to do. Violet Holland had money, connections, decades of carefully cultivated relationships. She had lawyers on retainer and judges who probably owed her favors from charity boards. What did Walter have? Some notes from his wife, a lawyer he'd just hired, and his own skills as an investigator. It should have felt like not enough. But Walter thought about Emma washing dishes in the dark, and he knew it would have to be. Monday morning arrived too soon. Walter woke to his alarm at 5 a.m. and spent an hour in his home office, going through his notes from the previous day. At 7, he got Emma ready for school while Diane called in sick to work. I can't go in, she said. Not today. Everyone's going to be talking about the party. Walter drove Emma to school himself, walking her to her classroom even though she usually took the bus. Her teacher, Roxanne Fry, pulled him aside. Is everything all right? She asked. Emma seems quiet this morning. Walter made a split-second decision. Actually, I need to talk to you. Do you have a few minutes after school? Something in his tone made Roxanne's expression shift. Of course. My last class ends at 3. He went back to the car where Diane was waiting. Her teacher noticed something was wrong. Did you tell her? Not yet. But I'm going to. He started driving toward Oak Park, toward Violet's neighborhood. We need witnesses. People who've seen how Violet treats Emma. Teachers are mandatory reporters. If Roxanne has noticed anything. Walter, that's going to make this even worse. It's already worse. Violet's lawyer called me 34 times. She sent threatening texts. She's not backing down, so neither are we. They parked a block away from Violet's house. The neighborhood was quiet on a Monday morning, most people already at work. Walter got out and started walking. What are you doing? Diane asked, knocking on doors. The first house belonged to an elderly couple, the Montgomerys. Walter introduced himself as Violet's son-in-law and asked if they'd noticed anything unusual about Emma's visits. Mrs. Montgomery hesitated, glancing at her husband. It's not really our business. Please, Walter said. This is about my daughter's safety. Well, Mrs. Montgomery said slowly. There was one time, maybe 2 months ago. I was in my garden, and I heard crying from Violet's backyard. When I looked over the fence, Emma was sitting on the ground by herself. It was nearly dark. I called over, asked if she was all right, and Violet came out and said Emma was in timeout for being rude. How long was she out there? At least an hour. I kept checking. It was nearly freezing that night. Walter wrote it down, thanked them, and moved to the next house. The pattern emerged over the next 3 hours. 8 neighbors, 6 of whom had noticed something troubling. Emma left outside in the cold, Emma crying in the yard, Emma looking frightened when Violet called for her. None of them had reported it. It's not really our place, they all said. Violet's very respected in the neighborhood. By 11 a.m., Walter had written statements from 5 neighbors. It wasn't enough to prove abuse, but it was a pattern. His phone rang. Sam West. I filed a motion this morning, Sam said without preamble. Protection order against Violet Holland. Temporary, pending a full hearing. No contact with Emma. No contact with you or Diane except through lawyers. Will it stick? The judge granted it based on the party incident and the harassment calls. We have a hearing in 2 weeks. That's when things get interesting. A pause. I also heard from Brett Beasley. Violet's filing for emergency grandparent visitation. She claims you're alienating her from her granddaughter without cause. We expected that. Yeah, but here's what we didn't expect. She's also claiming you assaulted her at the party. Battery, she's calling it. Walter felt cold. I never touched her. I know, but she's got a medical report. Went to the ER Saturday night. Claimed you grabbed her arm during the confrontation. She's got bruises documented. That's impossible. I didn't touch her. Self-inflicted, Sam said grimly. Or she had someone do it for her. Either way, it's smart. Muddles the narrative. Makes you look violent. Walter's mind raced. The witnesses will say you were angry, that you confronted her. Some of them might even misremember and think you touched her arm. Memory's funny that way, especially when someone's planting suggestions. Sam sighed. Look, we'll fight it. But this is what I meant about playing dirty. Violet's not just fighting for visitation. She's trying to destroy your credibility. After they hung up, Walter sat in the car with Diane, both of them processing. She really claims you hit her? Diane said. She went to the hospital and got it documented. Probably right after we left. Walter looked at his wife. This is who your mother is. She's willing to lie about assault to win. Diane's face was pale. What do? We find the truth about her. All of it. He started the car. Your father's death. The business. Everything. Because people like Violet don't just suddenly become this cruel. There's a history, and we're going to find it. They drove back home in silence. Walter spent the afternoon in his office, diving into public records. He started with Violet's husband, Diane's father, Glenn Holland Sr. Died of a heart attack at 51, 15 years ago. Cause of death was listed as myocardial infarction. No autopsy requested. Buried within 3 days. Walter dug deeper. He found the probate records for Glenn Sr.'s estate. Everything had gone to Violet. The house, the business, the investments. She'd sold Morton Holland Builders within 6 months for $2.3 million. A year later, the company was bankrupt. He found the names of Glenn Sr.'s former business partners. Most were dead or retired, but one name jumped out. Malcolm McLean, who tried to buy the business before Violet sold it to a different buyer. Walter found McLean's number and called. This is about Glenn Holland? McLean's voice was gravelly with age. That's a name I haven't heard in 15 years. I'm his son-in-law. I'm trying to understand what happened with the business. A long pause. You married Violet's daughter? Yes. My condolences. Malcolm gave a dry laugh. Glenn was a good man. Fair, honest. The business was solid. Then he up and died, and Violet couldn't wait to sell. I offered her fair market value, $3 million. She took 2.3 from some developer friend of hers. Why would she do that? Because that developer went bankrupt a year later, and Violet bought back all Glenn's client contracts at pennies on the dollar. Then she resold them for a profit. Smart business, if you're ruthless enough. Walter wrote this down, his mind working. Did you ever suspect anything about Glenn's death? The pause was longer this time. You asking what I think you're asking? I'm asking if you ever had doubts. Glenn was healthy. Ran marathons. Didn't smoke. Barely drank. Then one day his daughter finds him dead in his study. Violet didn't want an autopsy. Wouldn't even wait the standard time for a funeral. 3 days later, he's in the ground. Malcolm sighed. Do I have proof? No. Did I wonder? Every damn day for 15 years. Walter thanked him and hung up, his thoughts racing. It wasn't proof, but it was a thread. At 3 o'clock, he drove back to Emma's school and met with Roxanne Fry in her classroom. I need to tell you something, he said, and laid out everything. The party, the dishes, the pattern of behavior. Roxanne listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. I should have said something earlier, she finally said. There have been incidents. Emma's homework is always perfect, too perfect for a second grader. Last month I called her on an answer she gave, and she started crying. Said she had to get it right, or Grandma would be disappointed. Would you be willing to document that? More than willing. I'll write up everything I've observed. Roxanne met his eyes. I've been teaching for 20 years, Mr. Morton. I know abuse when I see it. I didn't realize it was that bad. It's worse than bad, Walter said. And I'm going to prove it. He drove home with Roxanne's promise to send him a full written statement by the end of the week. When he got back, Diane was on the phone with her Aunt May. I don't care what Mom told you, Diane was saying. I was there. I saw Emma crying. No. You listen. She looked up as Walter came in, her expression frustrated. May, I have to go. She hung up. May thinks I'm overreacting. She said Mom would never deliberately hurt Emma, that it was just a misunderstanding. What about the step stool? She doesn't remember seeing one. Walter felt his jaw tighten. Violet was already working the witnesses, reshaping the narrative. We need to talk to everyone who was at that party before she gets to all of them. Walter, these are my mother's friends. They're not going to turn on her. Some of them will. We just need to find the right ones. His phone buzzed. A text from Sam West. Violet's lawyer is pushing for an expedited hearing. Wants this resolved in 1 week instead of 2. Judge is considering it. Walter texted back. Can we be ready? Have to be. Start gathering everything. Photos, medical records, school reports, anything that shows a pattern. Walter looked at Diane. We have 1 week to build a case that took your mother 15 years to create. We need to move fast. She nodded, her expression hardening. Then let's move. They spent the rest of the evening making calls, sending emails, documenting everything. Walter reached out to every neighbor, every teacher, every parent who'd seen Emma with Violet. Some refused to talk. Some gave non-committal responses. But a few, a precious few, told the truth. By midnight, they had 17 documented incidents spanning 3 years. It still wasn't enough. Walter sat in his office, staring at his notes about Glenn Holland Sr.'s death. An idea was forming, dangerous and possibly insane. If Violet was willing to fake an assault to win a custody case, what else was she willing to do? And what had she already done? He opened his laptop and started researching how to request medical records from 15 years ago. Somewhere across town, Violet Holland was probably doing the same thing, building her case, calling in favors, preparing to destroy him. But Walter had one advantage. He knew how to find the truth. And the truth, once found, had a way of destroying everything in its path. The expedited hearing was set for Friday at 2 p.m. in Cook County Family Court. Walter spent Tuesday and Wednesday gathering evidence, while Sam West filed motion after motion, each one designed to put Violet on the defensive. Wednesday afternoon, Walter got a call from an unexpected source. Mr. Morton? This is Stacy Colon. I was at Violet's party on Saturday. Walter remembered her, a woman in her 40s, sitting near the dessert table, one of the few people who hadn't looked away when he'd carried Emma through the room. Thank you for calling, he said. I need to tell you something. After you left, Violet, she said things. About you, about your wife. She was furious. She kept saying she was going to make you regret embarrassing her, that she had lawyers who would make sure you never saw Emma again. Did anyone else hear this? At least 10 people. But Mr. Morton, that's not why I'm calling. Stacy's voice dropped. Violet and I served on the Oak Park Community Foundation board together for 5 years. I resigned last year because of how she treated people. What do you mean? There was a young woman on staff, Christy Roberts, 23, just out of college, working as our program coordinator. Bright, hardworking, kind. Violet made her life hell. Criticized everything she did, humiliated her in meetings, made her cry. Walter wrote the name down. Is Christy still with the foundation? No. She quit 6 months ago. I tried to warn the board about Violet's behavior, but she's a major donor. They chose the money. Stacy paused. I can give you Christy's number. And Mr. Morton? There were others before her. Girls who worked under Violet at various charities. They all left eventually. Walter felt that familiar rush. A pattern. I need their names. I'll send you everything I have. True to her word, Stacy emailed him within an hour. 6 names, all young women who'd worked with or for Violet on various charity boards. All had quit within a year. Walter started calling. The first 3 didn't answer or called back saying they couldn't help. The 4th, Candy Riggs, agreed to meet him at a coffee shop in Lincoln Park. She was 29, nervous, stirring her latte without drinking it. I don't want to get involved in anything, she said. I need you to understand that up front. I understand, Walter said. But I also need to protect my daughter. And I think you know what kind of person Violet Holland is. Candy's hands tightened around her cup. I worked for the Children's Literacy Foundation. Violet was on the board. I was the development director. Young, excited to make a difference. Violet seemed to like me at first. Then, she trailed off. Then what? Little things at first. Criticisms. Nothing I did was quite right. I was too casual, too familiar, too ambitious. But it was always in private, always just between us. In public, she was charming. Supportive. Candy finally looked up at him. Then she started with the tasks. What kind of tasks? Busy work. Things that had nothing to do with my job. Filing her personal paperwork. Picking up her dry cleaning. Once, she made me clean out her car while she was in a board meeting. I was development director, and she had me vacuuming her Mercedes. Did you complain? To who? She was the board chair. She controlled the budget. My supervisor told me to just do what Violet wanted. Candy's voice cracked. The worst part was, I started to believe her. That I wasn't good enough. That I should be grateful she was teaching me. That's what she said it was. Teaching me about the real world. How long did you work there? 8 months. Then one day, I just couldn't do it anymore. I quit. No notice, no other job lined up. I just walked out. She wiped her eyes. My therapist says it was abuse. Professional abuse. I didn't want to believe it, but it was, Walter said gently. And you're not the only one. He showed her the list of names. Candy read through it and nodded. I know Christy. We talk sometimes. The others, we're like this informal support group. Violet Holland survivors. Would any of them testify? In court. Candy looked terrified. Against Violet Holland? She'd destroy us. She's trying to get custody of my daughter. I need people who can speak to her pattern of behavior, her need for control, her cruelty. Candy was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, I'll testify. But only if others do too. I can't be alone in this. You won't be. By Thursday evening, Walter had 3 of the 6 women willing to testify. Candy, Christy, and a woman named Nadine Shepard who'd worked for Violet's Homeowners Association. All had similar stories. All described the same pattern. Initial charm, gradual criticism, escalating control, final humiliation. Sam West was pleased but cautious. It's good. It establishes a pattern. But Violet's lawyer is going to say this is about work relationships, not family. We need something that ties directly to Emma. I'm working on it, Walter said. He'd requested Glenn Holland Sr.'s medical records from the hospital where he'd been pronounced dead. It would take a subpoena to get them, but Sam was working on that. He'd also found the name of the detective who'd responded to the scene, retired now, living in Wisconsin. Detective Larry Love. Walter called him Thursday night. Glenn Holland, Larry said when Walter explained. Yeah, I remember that one. Seemed off. How so? Wife was too calm. Daughter was hysterical, but the wife? Cool as ice. Professional, even. She directed the EMTs, told them exactly what to do, managed the whole scene. Usually, when someone finds their spouse dead, they're a mess. She was organized. Did that make you suspicious? Sure. But the medical examiner ruled it a heart attack. No signs of trauma. No reason to suspect foul play. Larry paused. You think different? I think Violet Holland is capable of a lot more than people realize. She got a motive? Walter thought about the business sale, the carefully orchestrated bankruptcy. Money. Control. Freedom to live her life the way she wanted without a husband in the way. That's not proof. I know. But it's a theory. Good luck proving it, Larry said. After 15 years, you'll need a miracle. Walter hung up feeling frustrated but not defeated. He didn't need to prove Violet had killed her husband. He just needed to prove she was dangerous. And for that, he had plenty of evidence. Friday morning dawned clear and cold. Walter dressed in his one good suit, kissed Emma goodbye. She was staying with Diane's friend Tony Baker for the day, and drove to the courthouse with Diane. Sam West met them outside. "Ready as we'll ever be," Walter said. They walked into the courtroom. Violet was already there with Brett Beasley and two other lawyers Walter didn't recognize. She wore a pale blue suit, her hair perfect, her expression serene. When she saw Walter, she smiled slightly. It was the smile of someone who thought they'd already won. The judge was a woman in her 60s, Judge Merle Daly, known for being fair but no nonsense. She reviewed the case file, then looked up. "This is a petition for emergency grandparent visitation and a motion to modify the existing protection order. Mr. Beasley, you first." Brett Beasley stood. He was smooth, polished, exactly the kind of lawyer who charged $500 an hour. "Your Honor, this case is fundamentally about a loving grandmother being denied access to her granddaughter based on false allegations and a father's vengeful actions." He laid out Violet's case. Devoted grandmother, active in Emma's life for 8 years, sudden cutoff without cause. He described the party, Walter arriving unexpectedly, confronting Violet publicly, removing Emma forcibly, causing a scene. He presented medical records showing bruises on Violet's arm, implying assault. "Mr. Morton has a pattern of aggressive behavior," Beasley said. "He's a true crime writer who glorifies violence. His books celebrate revenge and vigilante justice. Is this the kind of influence we want controlling access to a child?" Walter felt his jaw tighten, but Sam had warned him about this. They were going to attack his character, his profession, his books. It was standard playbook. Beasley continued, painting Walter as unstable and Violet as the victim. He called character witnesses, Mae Brennan, who testified that Violet had always been loving with Emma. Glenn Rowe, who said Walter had seemed aggressive at the party. Then Beasley showed photos from the party. Emma earlier in the evening, smiling, dressed nicely. "This is not a child in distress," he said. "This is a happy girl at her grandmother's party. The narrative Mr. Morton is trying to create is fiction, Your Honor. Dramatic fiction designed to alienate a loving grandmother." When Beasley sat down, Judge Daly looked at Sam. "Mr. West." Sam stood. "Your Honor, this case is about a pattern of abuse that spans years. It's about a woman who uses wealth and social standing to control and hurt people, including her own granddaughter." He called Diane first. She took the stand looking pale but determined. "Mrs. Morton, tell us about your mother's relationship with Emma." Diane took a breath. "On the surface, it looked fine. But my mother has always been controlling. With me, with Emma, with everyone in her life. Emma had rules at Grandma's house that she didn't have anywhere else. Rules about how to sit, how to speak, what to wear. If she broke them, there were consequences. What kind of consequences? Punishments. Timeouts that lasted hours. Being denied food if she was rude. Being made to stand in uncomfortable positions." Diane's voice shook. "I told myself it was just discipline, that my mother had high standards. But when I saw Emma on Saturday night, washing dishes in the dark, barefoot and crying, I realized I'd been lying to myself." Beasley objected, tried to discredit her testimony as biased. But Diane held firm. Sam called the neighbors next. One by one, they testified about seeing Emma outside in the cold, hearing her cry, noticing things that seemed wrong. Then he called Roxanne Fry, who testified about Emma's fear of disappointing her grandmother, her too-perfect homework, her anxiety. Finally, Sam called Candy Riggs. "Ms. Riggs, how do you know Violet Holland?" "I worked for a charity she chaired." "Tell us about that experience." Candy described it, the gradual escalation, the humiliation, the control. When she finished, Beasley was on his feet. "Objection. This is irrelevant. Work relationships have nothing to do with grandparent rights. It goes to pattern, Your Honor," Sam said. "Mrs. Holland has a documented history of abusing her power over people she perceives as beneath her. Young women, subordinates, children." Judge Daly considered. "I'll allow it. Continue." Sam called Christy and Nadine, who gave similar testimony. By the time they were done, a picture had emerged. Violet Holland as a woman who needed control, who found vulnerable people and broke them down. "Your Honor, Sam said. "We're not asking you to punish Mrs. Holland. We're asking you to protect Emma Morton from a pattern of abuse that's been documented by multiple witnesses across multiple contexts. This is who Violet Holland is. She won't change, and Emma shouldn't have to suffer for it." Judge Daly looked at Violet. "Mrs. Holland, do you wish to testify?" Violet stood. She was composed, dignified. "Your Honor, these allegations are false. I love my granddaughter. Yes, I have high standards. Yes, I believe in discipline and proper behavior. But I have never abused Emma. The incident at my party was a misunderstanding. Emma had broken a valuable item, and I asked her to help clean up. When Mr. Morton arrived unexpectedly and saw her in the kitchen, he overreacted, dramatically and violently. The medical records show bruising consistent with being grabbed," Beasley added. "We have witnesses who saw Mr. Morton confront Mrs. Holland aggressively." Sam stood. "Your Honor, I'd like to call a rebuttal witness." Detective Larry Love, retired. Larry had driven down that morning at Walter's request. He took the stand and was sworn in. "Detective Love, you investigated the death of Glenn Holland Sr. 15 years ago. Can you tell us about that?" Objection. Beasley was on his feet. "This is completely irrelevant. It goes to Mrs. Holland's character," Sam said. Judge Daly frowned. "I'll allow it, but make it quick." Larry testified about the scene, Violet's unusual composure, the quick burial, the lack of autopsy. It wasn't proof of anything, but it planted a seed. Sam wrapped up. "Your Honor, we believe Emma is in danger. Not immediate physical danger, perhaps, but psychological danger. Violet Holland is a master manipulator who has hurt everyone she's had power over. We're asking for the protection order to remain in place and for all grandparent visitation to be terminated." Judge Daly looked at both sides. "I'm going to take a brief recess to review the evidence." She left the courtroom. Walter sat with Diane and Sam, waiting. Violet sat across the aisle, perfectly still, her face unreadable. 20 minutes later, Judge Daly returned. "I've reviewed the testimony and evidence," she said. "This is a difficult case. On one hand, grandparent rights are important. On the other, the evidence of a pattern of controlling and harmful behavior is concerning." Walter's heart hammered. "I'm going to continue the protection order for another 60 days. During that time, Mrs. Holland will have no contact with Emma or the Morton family. At the end of 60 days, we'll reconvene and determine if supervised visitation is appropriate." She looked at Violet. "Mrs. Holland, I suggest you use this time to reflect on your behavior and perhaps seek counseling. The testimony I heard today troubles me." Beasley started to object, but Judge Daly cut him off. "My ruling stands." Court adjourned. She left. Walter felt Diane grab his hand, squeezing tight. They'd won. Not completely, not permanently, but they'd won. Across the aisle, Violet stood. She looked at Walter, and for just a moment, her mask slipped. The rage in her eyes was absolute. Then she turned and walked out with her lawyers, her back straight, her head high. 60 days, Sam said. We use that time to build an even stronger case. Because she's not going to give up. Walter nodded. He knew Violet wouldn't give up, but neither would he. The 60 days became a war of attrition. Violet filed motion after motion, appeals, requests for expedited review, complaints against Sam for misconduct. Each one was denied, but each one cost time and money. Walter kept investigating. He interviewed more of Violet's victims, women who'd worked for her, neighbors who'd dealt with her, even a former housekeeper who'd quit after 6 months. The pattern was consistent. Violet targeted people she perceived as weak or beneath her. She built them up initially, then tore them down systematically. Some broke completely. Others, like the ones willing to testify, survived but carried the scars. Walter also kept digging into Glenn Holland Sr.'s death. He couldn't get the medical records without a court order, but he found something else, Glenn's life insurance policy. $2 million, paid out to Violet within 3 months of his death. And he found something else too. Glenn had updated his will 6 months before he died. In the original will, everything went to Violet. In the updated version, he'd created a trust for Diane that Violet couldn't touch. He'd also reduced her control over the business. Violet had never filed the updated will. She'd used the original, giving her complete control. It wasn't proof of murder, but it was motive. Walter compiled everything into a report and gave it to Sam, who filed it as supplementary evidence for the next hearing. Meanwhile, Emma was thriving. Without Violet's shadow, she'd become lighter, happier. She laughed more. Her homework was still good, but no longer perfect. Diane was healing too, seeing a therapist, working through years of manipulation. But Walter could feel the countdown. 50 days. 40. 30. Violet was quiet, which made him nervous. People like her didn't go quiet unless they were planning something. 20 days before the hearing, Walter's phone rang. Unknown number. Mr. Morton? This is Pablo Holden. I was Glenn Holland's business partner. Walter's pulse quickened. How can I help you? You've been asking questions about Glenn's death. I think we should meet. They met at a diner in Naperville, far from Oak Park. Pablo was in his 70s, white-haired and tired-looking. I should have said something years ago, he began. But I was scared. Violet's a powerful woman. Tell me now. Pablo pulled out an old folder. 2 months before Glenn died, he came to me. Said he was worried about Violet. Said she'd been asking questions about the business finances, about his health, about his life insurance. He thought she was planning something. Did he tell anyone else? No. He thought he was being paranoid. Then he updated his will, made sure Diane would be taken care of. He was going to leave Violet, file for divorce. Pablo's hands shook as he opened the folder. This is a letter he wrote me, dated a week before he died. Read it. Walter read. Pablo, if you're reading this, something's happened to me. I don't want to believe Violet capable of harm, but I can't ignore the signs. She's been researching heart conditions, asking my doctor questions about symptoms, inquiring about my medication. Last week, I found a bottle of pills in her bathroom cabinet, not prescribed to either of us. I've changed my will. Diane is protected. If I die suddenly, please make sure the new will is filed. And please, look into my death. I know this sounds paranoid, but I know my wife. She's capable of things I never wanted to believe. Glenn. Walter looked up. Did you investigate? I tried. But by the time I got the letter, Glenn had been dead for 4 days. Violet had already buried him, settled the estate with the old will. I went to the police, but without proof. Pablo shrugged helplessly. I was just a grieving business partner with a conspiracy theory. This letter is evidence. Of what? Glenn's paranoia? There's no proof she did anything. The me ruled heart attack. Case closed. Walter photographed the letter with his phone. Can I keep this? Take it. I've been carrying this guilt for 15 years. Maybe you can do something with it. Walter left the diner with the letter and a renewed sense of purpose. He called Sam immediately. We can't prove murder, Sam said after Walter explained. But we can show consciousness of guilt. The hidden will, the updated trust, Glenn's concerns. It paints a picture. Will it be enough? For criminal charges? No. For establishing that Violet is dangerous and manipulative? Maybe. 3 days before the hearing, Walter got a call from Stacy Colon, the woman from the party who'd testified. Mr. Morton, I need to tell you something. Violet came to see me yesterday. Walter's blood ran cold. Did she threaten you? Not directly. She was very polite. Said she understood I'd been confused at the hearing, that she hoped I'd remember things more clearly next time. Then she mentioned that my husband's company does business with several of her foundation partners. Stacy's voice shook. She didn't say it outright, but the message was clear. Change my testimony, or she'll destroy my husband's business. Are you going to change it? A long pause. No, because I remember something else now. Something I didn't think about during the first hearing. What? At the party, after you left, Violet was talking to her sister May. I overheard them in the powder room. May was upset about what happened with Emma. Violet said, and I quote, that child needs to learn her place. Just like Diane learned hers. Just like Glenn learned his. Walter felt something click into place. Will you testify to that? Yes. And I saved the recording. What recording? I was in the next stall. I started recording on my phone when I realized what they were talking about. I have the whole conversation. Walter could have kissed her. Send it to me. Now. The recording was damning. Violet's voice, clear and cold, talking about teaching people their place. About how Glenn had been too weak and Diane too much like her father. About how Emma was fixable if they broke her early. Sam filed it as evidence that evening, along with Glenn's letter and everything else they'd gathered. The final hearing was scheduled for Wednesday at 10 a.m. Tuesday night, Walter couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about Violet, about how far she was willing to go. People like her didn't lose gracefully. At 2 a.m., his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You think you've won. But you have no idea what I'm capable of. Tomorrow, you'll learn. Walter screenshot the text and sent it to Sam. Then he checked the security system, made sure all the doors were locked, and sat up the rest of the night keeping watch. Wednesday morning, they arrived at the courthouse at 9:30. Violet was already there with an expanded legal team, 5 lawyers now instead of 3. Judge Daly entered precisely at 10 a.m. "I've reviewed the new evidence," she said. "Mr. Beasley, does your client wish to respond to the recording presented by Mr. West?" Beasley stood, but for the first time, he looked uncertain. "Your Honor, that recording was obtained without Mrs. Holland's knowledge or consent. We move to have it excluded." "Illinois is a one-party consent state," Sam said. "The recording is admissible." Judge Daly nodded. "I'll allow it. Mrs. Holland, I've heard you on that recording talking about breaking your granddaughter. I've read testimony from multiple witnesses about a pattern of abusive behavior. I've seen evidence suggesting possible marital misconduct." She looked directly at Violet. "Do you have anything to say?" Violet stood. For the first time, Walter saw cracks in her composure. Her hands trembled slightly. Her voice, when she spoke, was tight. "Your Honor, I've been a pillar of this community for 30 years. I've served on boards, donated millions to charity, raised my daughter to be a productive member of society. These allegations are baseless attacks from a son-in-law who resents my success and wants to alienate my granddaughter from me." "The recording speaks for itself," Judge Daly said, "as does the testimony, as does the evidence of your late husband's concerns about you." "Hearsay and speculation," Beasley interjected. "Perhaps, but enough to establish a pattern." Judge Daly looked at her notes. "I'm prepared to rule." Walter held his breath. "Based on the evidence presented, I'm terminating all grandparent visitation rights for Violet Holland with regard to Emma Morton. The protection order is made permanent. Mrs. Holland is to have no contact with Emma, directly or indirectly, for the remainder of the child's minority." Violet went white. "Furthermore," Judge Daly continued, "I'm referring this case to the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services for further investigation into the allegations of abuse. And I'm recommending that the state's attorney review the evidence regarding Glenn Holland's death." "Your Honor, you can't," Beasley started. "I can and I have. My ruling is final." Court adjourned. The gavel came down. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Violet stood. She looked at Walter across the courtroom, and her face was a mask of pure hatred. "This isn't over," she said, her voice carrying in the silent room. "Yes, it is," Walter replied. Violet turned and walked out, her lawyers scrambling after her. Diane was crying, clutching Walter's arm. Sam was packing up his briefcase, looking satisfied. "She'll appeal," Sam said. "But she won't win. The evidence is too strong." "What about the criminal investigation?" Walter asked. "Long shot. Glenn's been dead for 15 years. But if the state's attorney finds anything..." Sam shrugged. "At minimum, it'll keep her busy. At best, there might be justice." They left the courthouse into bright May sunshine. Emma was waiting with Tony at a park across the street. When she saw them, she came running. "Did you win, Daddy?" Walter picked her up, held her close. "Yes, baby. We won." 3 weeks later, the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services completed their investigation. They found evidence of emotional abuse and recommended no contact between Violet and Emma. The report was scathing, documenting years of manipulation, control, and cruelty. The state's attorney opened an investigation into Glenn Holland's death. They exhumed his body and found elevated levels of digoxin, a heart medication he'd never been prescribed. The investigation was ongoing, but the implication was clear. Violet's world began to crumble. The Oak Park Community Foundation quietly asked for her resignation. 3 other boards followed suit. Her society friends stopped calling. The invitations dried up. She hired more lawyers, filed more appeals, made more threats. None of it worked. 6 months after the hearing, Walter got a call from Detective Love. "They're charging her," he said. "Murder in the first degree for Glenn Holland. The digoxin, the updated will, the life insurance. It's enough. Will it stick?" "Prosecutors think so. She's looking at 25 to life." Walter felt something settle in his chest. Not quite satisfaction, but close. "Thank you for calling," he said. He hung up and went to find Diane. She was in the backyard with Emma, watching their daughter play. "They're charging your mother," he said quietly. Diane was silent for a long moment. Then, good. Emma called for them to watch her cartwheel. They both clapped and cheered. That night, after Emma was asleep, Walter and Diane sat on their porch with glasses of wine. Do you think she'll be convicted? Diane asked. I don't know. But either way, she can't hurt Emma anymore. That's what matters. I keep thinking about all the years I let her control me. All the times I should have stood up. You stood up when it mattered. Diane leaned against him. We both did. They sat in comfortable silence, watching fireflies dance in the summer darkness. Walter's phone buzzed one last time. A message from Sam. Violet's bail was denied. She's in Cook County Jail awaiting trial. Thought you'd want to know. Walter deleted the message and set his phone aside. It was over. Not perfectly, not neatly, but over. Violet Holland would face justice, either in prison or in the court of public opinion that had already convicted her. Either way, she'd lost everything she valued. Her reputation, her power, her control. And Emma was safe, happy, free. In the end, that was all that mattered. Inside the house, Emma stirred in her sleep. Walter heard her settle again, her breathing deep and peaceful. He thought about the night he'd found her washing dishes in the dark and how far they'd all come since then. Justice, he'd learned as a prosecutor, didn't always come quickly. Sometimes it took years. Sometimes it took evidence and witnesses and dogged investigation. But when it finally arrived, it was worth the wait. Walter finished his wine and went inside to check on his daughter one more time. She was sleeping peacefully, her favorite rabbit tucked under her arm, a small smile on her face. He kissed her forehead and whispered, "You're safe now, baby. You'll always be safe." And for the first time in years, he believed it. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your time. If you enjoy this story, please subscribe to this channel. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.